Hello, my name is Eric Deloach. I'm a book author and I'm host of American Authors and Others. We have a special guest that came recommended, and he has a very interesting story. So at this time, let's allow him to introduce himself and tell us, a little bit about himself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. It's always a blessing that someone wants to hear my story. It's kind of humbling because I was that kid that was bullied, sexually abused by a teacher for 3 years, felt like I didn't have a voice, felt as if I didn't have a story. And when I began to share my story, I realized that there were other individuals, especially Black males, that had also suffered sexual abuse and was afraid to tell their story. And one of the things that I realized a little bit about my backstory is Dr. Lyman Montgomery, originally from Dayton, Ohio. I currently reside in Bloomington, Indiana. Been there almost 9 years now. A single dad raising a 19-year-old that has its challenges, but also great benefits. And I was like a lot of people. I grew up in a great family. My brothers and sisters, we all got along. It was mom, my stepdad who raised us, gave us a great work ethic. And yet there was this hidden secret of being sexually abused by a teacher, and was also the scout leader, was also the president of the Neighborhood Watch Association. And when my grandmother committed suicide, he actually read the obituary at the funeral. And no one knew about this hidden secret that I had carried. And this started from the time I was 10 up until the time I was roughly around 12, 13 years of age when it finally ended. And my parents didn't find out about it until I wrote my book, Shattered Mask, which we'll get into. A re-release and an updated version of that book, Shattered Mask. The first book was called Shattered Mask, 7 Masks That We Wear. The addition to that book, which will be released September the 11th, is called Shattered Masks From Tragedies to Strategies. 7 keys to help you live a focus-driven lifestyle. And so what I decided to do, because a lot of people would ask me about the book, and I've written 7 books since then, but it always went back to the first book of Shattered Mask, where it all began. How did I find the courage to tell my story? And why did I wait so long? This happened from 10 to 12, 13. I didn't write the book till 30-something years later.
Wow.
That's how long I lived in terror of keeping what I call the mask of silence. And most people grew up in a household that says this, Eric, what goes on in the house, what stays in the house, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is the house is on fire and no one's saying anything. And so many men I would come across all across the world, and they had similar stories. And the challenges that they were facing because they did not have the tools to shatter their mask. Someone said, why did you choose shatter the mask as opposed to break the mask? Because I know how men are. If we break something, we tend to fix it, right?
Right.
But if it's shattered, it's unrecognizable. And these bad traits and behaviors, because what happens when a person goes through abuse is that the brain tries to make sense of it and comes up with what's called coping mechanisms. And so that's why I call 7 masks, is because I just share a few of them. I'm not gonna give all of them away, but just a few of them. We get more in detail. Is the first mask, that mask of silence. Don't tell anyone what happened, because if you share what happened, then people will judge you differently. They're gonna think, oh man, you must be gay, or what did you do to allow this to happen? You see what I'm saying? So keep in mind, we're talking about in the 70s. There is no cell phone. There is no internet. There is no call 1-800 Child Protective Services that we knew of. And if you grew up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was this thing of machoism, right? A real man, men don't cry. You sit here with a broken arm and you better just, shake it off. And
let's
so
start.
then,
Let's
yes,
start here. Okay. So where I think you might have you alluded to it. Where were you? Where were you born and where did you grow up?
sure. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio,
Okay.
and we grew up in a neighborhood known as the View, Dayton View. It started out being a
Okay.
primary, matter of fact, I think my family, we moved in that neighborhood right around 1972, 73. It was a
Okay.
primarily Jewish neighborhood.
Right.
And the more Black people moved in, white flight happened. They moved out into
Right.
the suburbs.
Right.
But it was an upper middle class neighborhood. Everyone in the neighborhood, the 4, 5, 6 families that were there in the early 70s, and then we got more diverse
Right.
families. Everybody went to work, and so it was this very close knit sort of community.
Right.
And it was great, man. I mean, you
Now,
stayed out.
let me ask you, when did integration start in Ohio during that time? Was it
It was
around
around that time, yeah, right around 75, 76.
That's
Is
when it started.
when,
Okay.
yeah, that's when, because I remember, and that's how this happened, because the perpetrator was Caucasian, who lived in the neighborhood, lived in a great big mansion 2 blocks over, actually 1 block over from where I lived.
Did he have children? Did he have? Was he married and had children?
He did not. He was not married. Did not have kids. He had this huge mansion, and in our neighborhood, it's not uncommon to see 7, 8 bedroom mansions in the neighborhood. Okay.
Wow.
Right around the people that know Dayton, they know about the Dayton View area. They're named after prestige college. You had like Cambridge, Yale, Oxford.
Right.
So you had these huge mansions, Glendale.
Right.
And so he lived in one of the mansions that was literally 1 block over from where we live. Now, we didn't live in a mansion. We lived in, a nice modern, it was a nice house. Matter of fact, my mom still lives in the house there in Dayton. And so it was a great neighborhood, great school district. Right. And then busing happened right around 75, 76. And now I'm getting bused from, instead of walking up the street to my school, I'm getting bused across town to this other school.
Now, where you were walking prior to 75, that was all Black school?
Primarily, it was integrated. So we had, it was probably at the time 60% Black, 40% white, but I had friends that were Filipino. I had friends that we had a few Hispanics there, but for the most part, Caucasian, whites with a sprinkling of Hispanics and Asians.
So I guess then if you had the school that was already integrated, I wonder why would you get moved to another school and be bused if you already were in the school that was in the neighborhood?
Yeah. It was a strange thing. I think they looked primarily at, I don't know, the whole neighborhood, to do that. And so I ended up getting bused to another school way across town. I remember the first week, they would call us porch monkeys, the N-word. Matter of fact, we got on the bus, white students and parents would be literally rocking the bus, and we don't want these N-words in our neighborhoods.
Wow.
So it was very traumatic. And make a long story short, what happened where the abuse started, Eric, was my mother saw me failing in the school system that I was in.
Right. Well, I want to get to the abuse, but let's just got it kind of a direction first, and then we're going to get into that. Tell me of, let's say, your mother and father. What were they creative types? Were they did they paint? Did they write any books, or did they have any creative characteristics about themselves?
Yeah, I come from a very, very artistic, creative, great question, family. As an example, I write books. My older brother Robert is a gospel singer. My younger brother, like Martin, who's 2 years younger than me, graduated from Juilliard in
Okay.
dance, has been on Broadway 3 or 4 times, traveled all over the world.
Wow.
My youngest sister, Lovia, is a world-renowned photographer.
Wow.
And then there's my younger sister between like Martin and Lovia, Mika. She's an executive for Disney. My mom was an educator,
Okay.
but was heavy into the arts. So in our home, we grew up listening to jazz, to blues, to gospel, to classic music. All genres of music. And what was interesting, every Thursday, we did not go outside to play. It was family entertainment night. So my stepfather worked construction. And what would happen is every Thursday, whatever your gift, whatever your talent, you entertained the family. So I would always read a rendition by Dr. Martin Luther King or something. My oldest brother, Robert, would sing a song. Like Martin would dance. Lovia, she wasn't born yet. So she doesn't remember this. And then Mika, she was just a brainiac. So she would stand there with her report card and say, I got an A in English, an A in math.
Now, how did I guess your mother, how did that concept of contributing, if you will, or entertaining or sharing, how did that come about, and what do you think she had in mind with that?
I think it had a lot. My mother was the only child. And so I think when we came along, by my mother being in education, and my stepfather, I have to really give credit to my stepdad who raised us, because what he would do, he would pay 6 months in advance for lessons. So when I was going through this bullying phase, he said, this boy need to learn how to fight. So he put me in a martial arts. First day of karate, I break my arm.
Wow.
They were practicing sweeps. I wasn't paying attention. Break my arm. I'm like, okay, maybe karate is not for me. My stepdad had already paid 6 months in advance. He said, boy, you got 2 arms. Use the other one. I'm already paid. So you going back to karate. So I'm standing there with a cast on one arm, learning how to punch and learn how to fall. But I think what my parents realized and what my stepdad saw was so many people of color giving up when it got tough. And the reason that he paid 6 months, 3 to 6 months in advance, was to teach you commitment. That if he was willing to invest in you for 3 to 6 months, and here's the key. He would say, do it for 6 months. And if you don't like it, then we'll talk about it. So 6 months later, I come and I say, hey, I want to do something. I want to go play basketball. His advice was, you did 6 months, do 6 more. So you end up doing a whole year. And what happened to me.
So did you start to get, over time, you're like, well, I'm in this situation, so I better try at least try.
Absolutely. So what happened for me is that because I didn't learn how to speak till I was 8 years old. I wore braces on my legs and corrective shoes. And what martial arts did, it taught me balance. So when I started achieving small successes, I fell in love with it. Then I had a good friend of mine named Lyman, who was like a brother to me. He was also in the class. And we would practice together. And Lyman was a straight A student. And I became almost like his little brother. I followed Lyman around wherever he went and everything. And he really helped me. And we began to practice. And I remember the first time I learned how to throw a front kick without falling down. So it was those little small, consistent commitments that end up helping me to realize I can actually do this, and changing my belief system that because I went into it just thinking I want to learn how to fight so I don't get beat up every day.
Right.
And I never learned how to fight.
Okay.
I learned forms. And
Okay.
I'm like, why am I learning forms? It's almost like that picture, that illustrating the Karate Kid where he doesn't understand why he's putting the jacket on and taking it off.
Okay.
And oftentimes and this is the key here, going back to your question about the artistic ability of my parents.
Right.
I believe that they believed so much in us that they were willing to invest time, energy, and money.
Right.
And they never derailed us from following whatever dream.
Okay.
Whatever we wanted to do, as long as we could justify it,
okay,
they would put their resources behind it.
Okay. Now, with the stepfather, was he creative in any way?
He was. I think he's creative in the sense of he could build anything.
Okay.
Funny story. My cousin and I were horse playing in the upstairs and literally went through the wall.
Wow.
And we knew we were probably going to get, demolished.
Right.
And my stepdad came home and said, I guess you guys will be learning how to put up drywall this weekend.
Wow.
So it was, he was creative in the sense of knowing how to discipline us in a way that didn't break us.
Okay.
Based on our personality types.
Okay.
Never went to college, but it was just, he had this, and he still does. He just has this ability.
Right.
To have a conversation with you.
Right.
And to pull out of you what you don't see in yourself.
Okay.
And the way that he did that was by giving you projects.
Okay.
But he wouldn't give you the how-to. He said, just figure it out. Try to work on it. Figure it out yourself.
Wow.
And it's through that process of trying to figure it out that even if you made a mistake, you didn't criticize, he would come back and say, okay, now do it this way.
Okay.
So his creativity was more in, and he's from the country Kentucky boy. So his way was through demonstration, whereas my mother being an educator was more about looking at what the sciences were saying, looking at her own experiences, but also allowing us to explore. I mean, everything from they never told us to be Christians. Okay. Matter of fact, they tried to discourage us. Wow. From any religion unless we were able to defend why.
Wow. So that's interesting.
It's an interesting family. So we would sit down, and my oldest brother Robert and I, who are confessed Christians, they would have conversations like this. So why are you a Christian and not a Buddhist? What makes Christianity, in your opinion, better than being a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Hindu, or an atheist? And you had to research. And let me ask you this: How did you come about? I'm gonna say with this something else. How did you become a Christian without their influence of you influencing you to become a Christian? How did that happen for you and your brother? My oldest brother Robert and I. A lot of it had to do with my grandmother. My grandmother was a Christian. Okay, there we go. And so, grandma, my grandmother, before she got mentally ill, and took her own life, we would sit and she would read the Bible to us and taught us how to pray, and that kind of gave us our first foundation. Okay. When we were younger, my oldest brother Robert and I, we were at a park, and there was this little church next to the park, and we heard the music. Okay. And of course, my brother, loves music. Okay. And we went in there, and we were treated with such love, and they fed us. Yeah. I went there for the food. Okay. Okay. Hey, this is free lunch. I'm coming up. I'm writing a fourth book that's coming up, and I'm interested in that correlation that you're saying, that how you were treated and they did certain things and that influence. But continue. Absolutely. So they loved on us.
Okay.
I mean, they welcomed us in. They fed us, and it was fun.
Okay.
They had there was a lot of young people there.
Okay.
Now I will say I had a Sunday school teacher, Sister Kirsty. She was mean. Woo, she was mean. But she wasn't mean in the sense of being spiteful.
Okay.
She was mean in the sense she was very stern.
Okay.
Like them old church brothers, very stern.
Okay.
They didn't play.
Right.
And very, disciplined. And so they rewarded you also when you did your Bible memory verse and stuff like that.
Right.
And so that really, it was that love and acceptance and feeling a sense of community. Right. So much so that if we couldn't go to church, we would take stuffed animals, our pets, and our other little siblings. Right. Robert was singing out and then been the preacher.
Oh, okay.
And we would literally play church at home.
How old were you when you were doing this?
Oh my goodness. We were Robert was probably 10 and I was probably 8 or so.
Now that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's amazing that it was by that time of age you were convinced that I'm a Christian. This is the pathway.
Oh yeah. Wow. But it was a process. When we got baptized, I thought it was swimming, so I dove in the water. That ain't no better. I'm like, this is fun.
Yeah.
But I really got serious. Right around when I'm going through this abuse.
Okay.
And we're gonna get started. Right.
Let's go.
Because all this kind of ties in.
Yeah, we're gonna go there. We're gonna go. Let me go here. What was your grandmother or even your parents there? Were there any sayings that you remember that stuck with you, and that I guess that were positive, I would say, that stuck with you throughout the and I'll give you an example, like my mother, she's alive now, I'm a caregiver, that she would say, do things in moderation, and that you don't need an army, but I didn't know this. You don't need an army. You just need a few people to really accomplish things. And my dad would say, but I'm just giving you an example. So, sure. And that stuck with me. So, were there anything from any family, parents or grandparents that was a saying that you heard growing up, and that stuck with you? Excuse me.
Yeah. I would say that there were, so many, but the ones that stand out was my stepfather would always say, "Don't be a jackleg."
Don't be a jackleg?
Yeah, don't be a jackleg. And his explanation was, you immerse yourself in the skill or the craft that you're pursuing. Okay. And when he considered a jackleg, like a jackleg preacher was one who calls himself a preacher, right, but didn't study. Okay. Didn't know the word for himself. So he could only quote what he had heard. Okay. A jackleg dancer, he considered, was the street dancer with a tin can. Okay. But if you were to ask that, what was that move you did, they couldn't tell you because they haven't studied. And so for him, it was all about the discipline of immersing yourself into your craft. Right. That if you are challenged, you can give an account and speak intelligently about it, and not just your opinion. Because you always say, don't nobody care about your damn opinion. Everybody got one. Right. So that was one. Another one, my mother oftentimes would say things like, the fruit don't fall far from the tree. Okay. But never would explain, especially when I was dating somebody. Right. She knew the parents were like, baby, the fruit don't fall far from the tree, but never told you what that meant. So my parents would say things, but they wouldn't give you the explanation until after it didn't work. And then it's like, baby, I tried to tell you. And she would say stuff like this. Some lessons you just got to find out on your own. Wow. I can't tell you everything because you won't respect it. So on one hand, it was great. The other hand, like, Mom, you could have saved me a whole lot of heartache.
Headache, right? Yeah.
And headache.
Yeah.
You know,
Now,
another thing.
was there anything your grandmother sayings that she had?
Oh, yeah. Always remember the Lord is your shepherd.
Okay.
Psalms 23 was her favorite verse. And no matter what, should always would say, remember the Lord is your shepherd and you shall not want. I don't care what if you was going through pain, the Lord is your shepherd.
Now, now segue into this abuse. We don't want to make that the total thing, but I know that was a significant, I guess, eventually positive thing, even though initially a negative thing. Did that saying by her give you the strength to survive this abuse?
You know, I think as I think about it, subconsciously, yes. I think it was those affirmations that I didn't know at the time were affirmations.
Right.
That when I was going through it, I would find myself saying it.
Right.
I would find myself also questioning, you know, why me?
And what age and where did this unfortunate occurrence happen? Incident?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it started out, the short story is because the perpetrator was also, like I said, president of the Neighborhood Watch Association. He was also the scout leader.
Okay.
And we were in Boy Scouts and he was our scout master.
Right.
And he would have kids of all ages at his house. And he had remember the old Atari games?
Right.
So he had Atari and, you know, it was like a fun place to hang out.
Right.
And he also would do these night patrols. Neighborhood watch patrol. And I had begged my parents, I wanted to go out on night patrol. At this time, SWAT, remember, was real hot at the time.
Okay.
And I thought, you know, kind of like being a police, we was gonna go out there and maybe see some real crime. And my mother, to her credit, did all the things a parent at that time would do. She spoke with other parents. She spoke to the police department. She spoke to the school. Right. Everyone had nothing but great things to say about this individual. So
now, was there not a red flag? I mean, this man was, you know, not married, didn't have a girlfriend or whatever. That didn't pose as some type of flag.
Keep in mind, at that time, no, because if there were red flags, and you would, you know, you talk with other parents, and all the parents would, you know, would say, "Oh no, he's great." And the truth of the matter is this: I was making D's and F's when he started tutoring me. I went from D's and F's to A's and B's.
This guy tutored you. This guy tutored you.
Yes. That's why we went to his house after school, because he would have kids there. So people's parents, I think, thought of it as an after-school tutoring program, because the results were these kids that were flunking are now making honor roll.
I'm trying to think also why maybe parents or somebody, you know, like I took piano lessons and from a lady that's at my church, classical piano lessons, but my mother was there. My dad was there. I wasn't left alone. You know what I'm saying? Left alone with that person.
Right.
Something like that.
And I think because there were so many kids there, and there were parents that would come, there would parent, because the abuse for me didn't happen until we went on that night patrol. And I did a sleepover there, which my parents were against. And I said, Mom, is it camping? I mean, and you know, I just pretty much for months would ask my mother, and she would say, no. And I think she kind of regrets it now. She finally said, well, let me call some talk to the parents. And she did everything a parent would do. You know, you call the police department, any complaints, you speak with other parents. And
Right.
every parent that she spoke to, she called the school, and the school was like, he's teacher of the year 2 times in a row. So there weren't those types of red flags.
Right.
And you start seeing kids, like I said, making D's and L's, all of a sudden they're on honor roll.
Okay.
And
Now, how long were you in the way of this person? Was it like that? You said it lasts for about 2 years.
2 or 3 years, yeah. But
okay.
that's
And
the
what
initial
stopped it?
abuse.
What brought it to an end?
Sure. That answered the first part. So the first year and a half, there was absolutely nothing that was out of place. He never tried anything.
Okay.
He would just tutor me.
Okay.
And other kids. So it'd be a group. And when my grades started improving, what made things change is that he was at a different school system. He was at a magnet school. Okay. He had suggested to my parents that Lyman is extremely smart. He's not being challenged.
Okay.
Would you consider moving him to a foreign language magnet school where he could learn either Spanish, German, or French?
Right.
Well, my mother been educated, said, oh man, this is awesome. Yes, he needs to learn a foreign language.
Right.
Okay. So it fed into her artistic ability and education ability. So the abuse didn't start until I left the current school system and went to this magnet school. Actually, my brother Robert and I went to this magnet school.
Right.
Together. Then this is in 6th grade.
Right.
And then right around that summer of the 6th grade is when it happened. We went on the night patrol.
Okay.
But he was not the one that did the abuse. So this is the part that was horrific for me. Remember I said he had a house full of kids. So he had older boys there.
Okay.
That were like the enforcers.
Okay.
So they would be the ones that would actually do the sexual abuse. Then he would come in and insert himself when they were done.
So you had 2 sets of abusers.
Yes. So you had teenagers, these teenage boys, that would initiate the abuse. You had one of them who had the nickname of Geronimo. He was known for setting garages on fire. He was the main enforcer.
But was he aware of what these kids were doing to kids?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was all.
So I'm just saying, like they did their thing and they moved out the way, and then he didn't know, and then he did his thing. You see what I'm saying? Or was it?
No, it was
all aware
that
they were doing stuff, and then all of a sudden, here comes him.
Then come him, right. Because what would happen is, because of this one kid that they called Geronimo,
right,
who was known in the neighborhood for setting garages and houses on fire. He was a serial arsonist. Everybody knew this.
Right.
That if you told what was taking place, he instilled such fear and terror that you went to bed wondering if you was going to wake up with the house literally on fire.
Okay.
Because everybody knew this kid was crazy. Matter of fact, he went to school at a hospital.
Okay.
All right. And so it was those sort of psychological mind tricks that the perpetrator played. All right.
Now, so then let's go here. When did it? How did it end? Okay, we ended.
Sure. Yeah. This is what happened. There was another kid at the school that had been molested by this teacher.
Okay.
This student had the courage to say something.
Okay.
He told his grandmother.
Okay.
There was a huge investigation at the school.
Right.
The FBI showed up at our house.
Okay.
They interviewed me. I lied and said, nope, didn't know what was happening.
Right.
And my stepfather, my mother actually went and testified in support of the perpetrator and talked about, all the great things that happened. My stepfather was the one that said, I don't know, but y'all won't be going over there no more.
Right. It's
So I
interesting
think,
how a men sometimes are more cautious. It's where
yeah,
women, not saying anything wrong there, but sometimes women, I guess she saw the results of grades and different
yes,
people of it, and that, and then you didn't say anything, and you were fearful. We understand that,
right,
but it's how that, it's interesting how that um the stepfather had a sixth sense that something wasn't correct here.
right. He knew something.
Right. He
And he
felt
didn't
something.
care about, the grades and all that was good,
Right.
but he had the concerns that you raised. He
Right.
started thinking about, I don't ever see no women over there.
Right.
So I think it's part of him looking at the situation differently. My
Okay.
mother's very open and very caring,
Right.
loves everybody, accepting of everybody.
Well, there's another
Um,
thing. I'm with the school and stuff like that, college and grad, and sometimes, and I think I'm not gonna say anything about women, but I just say people that go to school to certain levels, they become like overly trusting of
yeah, yeah,
institutions, where somebody
yeah.
who doesn't, uh,
Street smarts.
yeah, they kind of said, no, I don't care if that's at the White House.
Mm-hmm.
Something is up. I don't, what I'm saying? I don't care if
Right,
it's the White
right.
House, something is up at the White House. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think you're right. I think my dad, pops, he just started thinking about it,
Right.
um, and having that street sense.
And it
Uh,
probably, you think also he might have um kind of noticed something wasn't quite with your how you were walking around, or how you were, because one thing we have to say that was definitely a string a humongous positive, is that you had this event, you said every Thursday or whatever, once a week, and
yes,
that was a moment to notice that the person is not themselves.
but for me
Notice
it was the
something
opposite.
was off
Yeah,
in that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Maybe
But
before
for
something
me it
like
was
that
the
happened,
opposite.
you
Yeah,
were
for me it was
happy.
opposite. It was the opposite because
Give me.
in that moment I could become someone else.
Wow.
So in my mind, I wasn't Lyman. I was Dr. King. I
Right.
was Ralph Robeson. You
Okay.
know, I became. That's why talk about seven masks. I became all these different personalities
That's
because
amazing. That
I did not believe that Lyman had the strength. So, and how that came about was my best friend Naaman, who really helped me to find my voice. I had to give this speech called The Creation by
okay.
James Weldon Johnson. It's an extremely long poem.
Okay.
And I went to Naaman and I said, Naaman, and I couldn't really talk. I was in speech therapy 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And Naaman said, who's your favorite person? I said, Dr. King. He said,
Right.
well, how would Dr. King say it? And
Right.
if I mimicked Dr. King, I didn't stutter, I could say it flawless. But if I went back to me, full of insecurities, full of doubt, full of self-hatred and self-loathing, I couldn't even say my name hardly.
Wow. That is interesting, to where there was no detection. So let's go back to that. Is interesting that you can change. You could change in the character. That, I guess, that was your one moment of
Safety net. It was a
happiness
safety.
among the
Yes.
chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
you felt safe in that. That is, man. I mean, that is interesting. Now let's go back to how did it end for you, and I guess for others, and what was the outcome for this guy, and I guess
Sure.
the crazy Geronimo, that crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What ended up happening is the perpetrator moved out of, it was so much heat, he moved out of the neighborhood, moved out into the country, went into a different school system.
Okay.
I literally felt that because of all the heat and all of the media attention, that he would see the errors of his ways and would stop.
Right.
It
Now,
wasn't
when
until
he
I
left,
was,
you were, well, your stepfather had already moved you out the situation
right,
when he
right,
suspected stuff.
had already moved out.
And what happened to crazy Geronimo?
I don't know. I don't even know if he's still alive.
Right. What I'm saying, once the guy,
time,
no, I'm saying once the guy moved out, what happened to him at that moment?
I don't know. I don't know. I never saw him again.
You never interacted with him at that point.
No, never interacted with him again. His family moved out of the neighborhood. Don't know where he moved to.
And it just stopped. And it stopped just like that once he moved. Once these people left, then it was over.
It was over for me, but he continued doing this in another neighborhood. And it wasn't until I think I was a sophomore in high school, and there was a news flash of a teacher being carried out of a school in handcuffs.
Okay.
And that's when my heart dropped, because I felt responsible that if I had said something years earlier, I could have saved, Lord knows how many other students.
Well, you were a kid. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
But that's how your brain, that's how your brain sort of plays.
Right, but you have to realize that you were a kid and you didn't quite know how to deal with the situation. Right. Did you ever get counseling for this?
Yes. Oh, yes. I pastoral counseling.
Okay.
Psychological counseling. I was in college because the weight. I ended up trying to commit suicide in college because carrying all this, burden and weight.
Right.
But what really set me free, Eric, was and what led to writing the book and subsequently the second book.
Okay.
Was a good friend of mine who was a mentee of mine.
Right.
He worked for me. He was my college intern. And I was an administrator at a little small college.
Okay.
And introduced him to speaking. And in 2009, 2010, he called me up, told me he had just given a speech on overcoming sexual abuse.
Okay.
And at this time, I had known Mark for 20 years, never knew anything about it.
Wow.
Come to find out, Eric, he and I had the same perpetrator.
Wow.
But
did you know him when he was young?
I did not. No. He was part of that wave.
So he was in another district with this guy?
Yes, when he got arrested.
Okay.
So it was just amazing how life works.
Right.
And when I began, we literally cried on the phone. And Mark was the one that really said, Lyman, you got to tell this story, man. You can't keep hearing this. It's too big for you.
Okay.
And that's what really gave me the courage to write the first book, Shattered Mask.
Okay. Now, in your counseling, what age did you start taking counseling?
Ooh.
Or seeked out counseling? Also, this. Did you also at some point talk with your parents about this?
No.
Okay.
What I did was I went to counseling, but not for that.
Okay.
It was for academics. It was because I had kind of put that out of my mind.
Okay.
I literally had, and I talk about this in the book, I had taken that experience, those 3 years, and put them in a box, dug a hole, put concrete over it, and planted a tree over it. Okay. Wow. And literally forgot about it. So there's parts of my childhood during that time I have no memory of. It's absolutely gone.
Wow. Now, did you ever do therapy? I mean, one thing is Christian counseling, which might have been sufficient. Did you ever do professional therapy?
I did, but again, it was more talking about symptoms rather than what the root cause, because I literally didn't think that event had affected me as much as it actually did.
Yeah.
What brought about true deliverance for me was writing the book.
Okay,
and
so that
at the time, oh my goodness, because when I finally put it on paper, I felt such a release.
Okay.
Because it was an open now. And
Okay.
then as far as my parents, I did not tell my parents until the book was published. And I still didn't tell them. My sister Mika got a copy of the book,
right,
read the book, and snitched on me and told my mother.
Okay.
And the hardest conversation that I ever had in my life was explaining to my mother why I did not tell her.
Okay.
And
now let me. Okay. Go, yeah. Continue with that. Okay.
That conversation was so painful.
Okay.
To hear my mother scream and feel as if life had been taken from her. That for 3 years her baby was in pain.
Right.
And she vouched for this guy in a courthouse.
Right.
And felt somewhat responsible.
Okay.
And her question to me, why didn't you not tell me? And I explained to her, I did not say anything because I was afraid that I would lose both parents. Because if I told, I knew without a shot of a doubt, my stepfather and my mother would have killed him.
Wow.
It was not even a question.
Right.
Because that just would have been a road that they wouldn't let go.
Okay.
That's what I felt.
Okay.
When I spoke with my stepdad and told him, he confirmed, he said, you know, I would have killed the SOB. I said, that's why I didn't tell you.
Wow. Wow.
He was like, oh, no, you don't understand. He would have disappeared.
Wow.
He said, I got ways.
Right.
And I knew he did. He probably would have put a hit on him.
Right.
You know, he worked construction. He would end up at a construction site somewhere.
Right.
But at the time, like you said, as a kid, you're trying to say, you know what? I got to protect my family.
Right.
And I don't want to lose my mom. Don't want to lose my stepdad, who's a great dad. Right. I don't want, my brother. Then the other part of that is I was so used to being beat up that what's this, right?
Right.
So again, it's that self-image. Like I got beat up all the time.
Okay. So you were kind of the smart kid in the neighborhood, and
they got beat up all the time.
Wow. Well, let's go back here. And we get there. Where was let me see. Were there well, let's go here. What brought about what made you decide to write the book? What said, okay, I have to write this book.
After I had that conversation with Mark Anthony Garrett, who also had been abused by the same person, but 4 or 5 years later. And when he challenged me, he said, Lyman, you got to write, man. He said, I've been knowing you for 20 years at that time.
Right.
He said, and he called me, he said, man, you being fake.
Okay.
I said, what do you mean? He's like, Lyman, he said, I love you like a brother. You're my mentor.
Right.
He said, but you walking around telling these great stories and telling these kids everything's going to be all right, but you're not telling them the truth.
Okay.
You're not telling them how you got to where you're at now.
Okay.
So all they're seeing is half of you.
Okay.
And when that hit me because he was telling the truth.
Right.
I was not living my authentic self. I was telling people you can overcome anything, you can do all things through Christ.
Right.
And people thought I had this, I talked about not being able to speak till I was 8 years old and crediting my speech therapist, crediting martial arts for learning how to, gain my balance.
Right.
But I wasn't telling them that dark stuff.
Okay. How old were you when you decided to write the book and began the process?
I was 35.
Okay. Well, let's fill in the gray spots and come right back to that. So you sailed in high school, and when did you go? Okay. When and where did you go to college?
Ohio University. So I graduated.
University?
Yeah, okay. Athens, Ohio. So I graduated in 86. And by the summer of 86, I was sitting in a hot classroom in the Hocking Hills of Athens, Ohio, at Ohio University.
Okay.
Graduated, went through my 4 years there, pledged my fraternity.
What was your major?
I was a health administration major.
What made you pick that?
I always loved caring for people.
Okay.
And
you always loved caring for people.
Caring for people. But
Wow.
I wanted to be in a position rather than the hands. I was a nursing assistant.
Okay.
But rather than the hands-on, I wanted to be in a decision-making position to make sure that I was empowered to really make change in the healthcare industry.
Do you think, here we go, do you think that because of that incident, did that influence that now I'm getting educated, and I felt helpless at the moment that this abuse happened, but now there's a chance that I can be helpful and empowered to help the less fortunate.
Absolutely.
That the abuse had an effect that you said, now I can do something.
Yes, okay. Because I looked at what level, if I'm doing direct patient care,
right,
I have direct access to the patient, right, but I don't have the ability to make real change because I got a boss.
Right.
So part of that, quick diversion here, when my father worked construction, I would go to the construction site.
Right.
I always wondered who was generally a white guy with an orange helmet on with blueprints pointing. And he would say, he's the boss, he's a supervisor.
Right.
And it seemed like he was in charge. Everybody was doing what he said.
Right.
So I wanted to be the person that could either influence or be in charge to make sure that those that didn't have a voice had a voice. Those who didn't have a shot got the ball to make the shot. And so that's why I made that decision to be in administration, to be an administrator, because I knew what it was like to never get the ball.
Okay.
To never be picked on the team. Okay.
So you think that situation might have influenced you to
I believe so.
To want to be empowered.
To want to be empowered, to empower others. Exactly. I think the other thing that really influenced me was in 5th grade, we did a field trip to a nursing home.
Okay.
And the administrator, I remember this day, Mr. Rankin.
Okay.
And he knew a lot about, he carried himself very well. He knew how to play the piano.
Right.
And I asked him, I said, what does it take to be successful?
Right.
And he said, go to school, do your best. He said, dress for success. I didn't know what that meant. And he said, practice your vocabulary.
Okay.
You have to be able to speak. And then he said, read the paper every day.
Okay.
I went home.
Go ahead.
And I told my mother that I no longer wanted to wear blue jeans. I wanted to dress like I was the boss. So if you look at my pictures from 5th grade all the way through college, I'm in a shirt and tie.
Okay. Wow.
And I remember they used to call me the Black Alex Keaton.
And I think also that that when you did this, when you were doing the Martin Luther King speeches in that weekly demonstration of your talent, that you felt empowered. Yes. And I guess King and others like that influenced you, and you saw, well, I can transition in this in real life, and I can be so to speak a king in my, Martin Luther King in my own way.
In my own way, yes. Yes, Dr. King, A. Philip Randolph, Ralph Robeson, my man, just this great voice. And, there were just others that I would just look at.
Right.
And, Jesse Jackson, his use of rock. And I would look at them and I would notice how people responded to them.
Yeah. Now let me okay, go. I want to say, but go ahead. You notice how people responded.
Yeah, I noticed how people responded.
What was the response?
It was almost like they were able to hypnotize the audience.
Okay.
and get people to do things
Mm-hmm.
that maybe they would not otherwise do, to be able to convince an audience to take action.
Okay.
To, I read about Malcolm X and the
Mm-hmm.
famous story
Right.
of where, he had this huge crowd. I think it's portrayed with Denzel Washington. He played Malcolm,
Right.
where he just turned and they all turned like in unison.
Right.
And then the officer said, "No black men have that much power."
Right.
But I
right.
read that and I was like, how do I become that guy?
Right.
But it was not just one point. It was like an amalgamation of all these different individuals of saying, how can I speak like King,
Right.
have the strategy of a Malcolm X,
Right.
have the voice of a Ralph Robeson,
Right.
that booming baritone voice,
Right.
but also be able to organize like an A. Philip Randolph.
Wow.
So I started picking all these little pieces.
Right. These traits.
These different traits, exactly, and looked at how I could apply them to myself. And
okay.
So even though I'm getting bullied, I'm breaking up fights.
Wow. You felt empowered.
I felt empowered.
Now,
so then I became class.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. And I want that shit, but go ahead.
Yeah. So now, even though I'm going through all this hell, right?
Right.
I found safety in service. So
found safety in service.
Safety in service.
That
So
should be a title of a book.
Oh man, boy, you preaching good now. You right.
I think you got something cooking on the stove.
Oh man, I smell it.
Safety in service. You got
in service.
There you go. Go ahead.
Safety in service. And so I'm mediating. I'm asking these two guys getting ready to kill each other.
Right.
Well, what's going on with you?
Right.
Well, I didn't know that's coaching. Right. I'm mediating between the two.
Right.
I got so good at it. Now I become class president.
Wow.
Okay. Then I'm becoming honor roll. Then I win the school speech competition.
Wow.
Then I become school president.
And guess what? Right. And all this can still, even from the abuse, but the positive side of these, expressing your talent in a creative way, it stems from that as well.
Right. That's why I said.
And you getting a chance to know these different important historic figures and what they contributed. And then now you wanted to take these positive parts and put that armor on.
And put that, I love that. Put that armor on. Because what happened.
I'm a songwriter, so I'm a songwriter.
Oh man, that's so what happened that really transformed my thinking.
Right.
Was that while I couldn't do it,
right.
One of the reasons I excelled in martial arts, I became Jim Kelly. When I saw Jim Kelly and Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, I wanted to be Jim Kelly. Everybody would be Bruce Lee. I'll be Jim Kelly with a big afro.
Yeah. Wow.
He was unorthodox.
Right.
And so that I became like Jim Kelly. Like, oh man, he couldn't throw a straight side kick.
Right.
Mine was crooked, but that was okay. He was sweet with it.
Right.
So in my mind, and again, my parents introduced us to the theater and all these different creative genres.
Right.
That I just began, man. It was like going to a smorgasbord and saying, "Oh, I can take a little bit of this.
Right.
I can take a little bit of that."
Right.
The only problem with that, I never, at that particular time, till years later, learned how to stand as Lyman. So those
you were creating this Frankenstein, but it wasn't quite you.
Right. Oh, that's a good one. Woo.
Oh, that's another one.
That's a good one.
What? Something about creating Frankenstein. That's another one. Something there.
Man,
something.
I think we're gonna have a meal when this is over with.
You said don't create your own. Something about creating Frankenstein.
Yeah, I like
you figure it out.
It's
you go run with it. It's something there.
It's true. I was like Frankenstein. All right. That I remember looking in the mirror and I didn't know who I was looking at.
Wow.
I literally did not know who I was.
Right.
Because I was so many things to so many people.
Right.
That, I'm in college.
Right.
And people think I'm a political science major, not a health administration major. because I'm always leading speeches and marches and all this other stuff.
Right.
They never heard me talk about healthcare.
Yeah. Well, it's also stemming from being a Christian.
Yes.
And let's go here, and this is what I want to see where this fell into the mix of life for you, in the events of life. What happened with your grandmother, and when did she commit suicide, and what was that about?
Yeah.
Where were you and all of that when all that happened?
Yeah.
We're gonna get up. We're gonna get to the book.
No problem. These are great questions, and something I've never been asked before. And I've done hundreds of podcasts, and this is a true testament to your ability to really be a great interviewer.
Right. Thank you.
My grandmother had suffered from mental illness, and at the time, in those days, she had went through shock treatment.
Was it dementia at the time?
I'm not sure. They didn't know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Dementia is kind of like they lose their memory a little bit, and they'll remember something from the past. And then what'll happen is they will continuously ask you the same question because they're upset that they can't have control of their memory. So they'll ask you something 4, 5, or 6 times, but they can't control that, they can't remember, and they're trying to control it. Well, what did you do yesterday? I went to the park. What did you do yesterday? I went to the park. What did you do yesterday? I went to the park. They're trying to keep it, but they have they had dementia.
Yeah, I'm not sure what she was diagnosed with.
Right.
From what my mother has shared with me, is that my grandmother felt that something was wrong in her head from the time that my mother was a child.
Okay.
And my mother really doesn't talk about it. It's too painful for her to talk about it. But the only thing she did say was that she felt like there were these voices in her head that she couldn't control. And they got louder and louder and louder. And they almost
how old were you when it got noticeable and it became somewhat of an issue?
Probably around 11, 12-ish.
Okay.
I would say 11, 12. I think she took her life when I was 13.
Okay.
My mother knew it. We was actually at the movies watching The Coal Miner's Daughter.
Right.
Loretta Lynn's story.
Right.
And my mother got this cold feeling. And she said, something's wrong. We got to leave.
Wow. And
she's had like a premonition.
Wow.
We leave and she gets the phone call.
Right.
And then life just changed forever. I was so angry.
Right.
I was so angry to the point that I could not grieve my grandmother for years.
Now, what actually happened, and where did it occur?
Yeah, what happened is she had written a letter, and she found my grandfather's revolver. Okay. And she went downstairs in the hallway by the front door and pretty much put the gun to her head and blew her brains out, in which there was brain, matter on the ceilings and part of the wall.
But she did this on purpose, or was this accidental?
It was on purpose because she left the suicide note. She had left the note. What
was she saying in the note? What was the?
I don't remember. I think the essence, from what I can remember, is that I remember talking about she wanted to be buried in Huntsville, Alabama, next to her mother.
Right.
That she loved us.
Right.
But that she was tired and she was ready to go home.
Okay. You think
there was more in there? And I remember also had talked about what she wanted to wear.
Wow.
The dress she wanted to wear, the songs that she wanted sung. Precious Lord, Take My Hand at the funeral. She wanted to
did she live alone, or did she live with your family?
No. She lived with my grandfather. My grandfather and her, they lived. My grandfather extremely
Was he alive
strong.
when this happened?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He found her. He found her. And
Okay.
um, it literally it changed him. I think it would change anyone to find your spouse
Oh yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
And so we end up having a funeral in Dayton.
Right.
And then they shipped the body to Huntsville, Alabama.
Right.
And we had to relive this whole event again a week or two later in Huntsville, Alabama. And for me, my brother was grieving. My oldest brother, Robert, was grieving.
Right.
And I was just numb. And I remember my brother.
Well, that's like
Robert,
an extra thing on your plate.
Yes.
And this was
that
actually what? This was actually during the time that
yes.
this was happening.
Yes.
So that might have been overload. I can't handle anything else. I mean, this is too much.
Yeah, the perpetrator actually read the obituary. He was at my grandmother's funeral.
And that was like what's the saying? Putting salt in a wound.
Oh yeah.
How dare you come in this church and in a vulnerable moment act like a saint and have the a mitigating God to do this, the audacity to do this.
Absolutely. And then that money go and sit in his classroom.
What happened now? And said you had to go sit in his classroom and and this was why the abuse was still going on.
Yes. And so it was
but do you think that she took her life because she couldn't control some type of evil spirit, not her, but this illness? She didn't want to deal with it anymore.
I believe so. I think there were a number of factors. Looking back on it, number one, I think it was a lack of understanding who she was as a Christian and what that really meant. It was not uncommon in those days for a number of people, especially from the South, to have almost like a pseudo form of Christianity, where they believe in Christianity. They also believe in root workers. They believe in psychics. They believe in, so they understand the spiritual world.
So but you think that she believed in several different things? Or
I believe so.
I think, suggesting.
Yeah, I think she believed in Jesus, but also believed in other spiritual forces out there.
Could that be? I mean, this is just the nature of a surface Christian, and most of us, a lot of people are. Is that as long as things are going well, long as things are manageable and we can handle it, okay, I'm a Christian. But soon as it goes south and I don't see God coming when I want him to come, then hey, I'm gonna have to work this out for myself. I'm gonna have to figure this out. Then things like something like this could happen.
It's almost like what the Bible talks about in the Old Testament, where it talks about Saul. And the Bible said the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul. And you find Saul, an old man, and he goes and inquire of the witch of Endor. Okay. Because he needs a word. He doesn't care because God's not speaking to him. So he goes to a witch to get a word. And a familiar spirit comes and why have you awakened me, Saul? And I think sometimes people are hurting for a word. That they will seek that word from any source because they just want to feel some type of connection
and release the pain
and release. Exactly. And they will find that through destructive behavior. Something you had mentioned earlier, and I think And what I've noticed in having talked with hundreds, maybe thousands of men in particular that
Right.
have gone through abuse, there seems to be sort of like a dual path.
Mhm.
Those that fall into destructive behaviors,
Right.
drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, they become abusive, beating women,
Right.
and then you have others that they go into this performance
And
where
that
they
was you.
become, and that
And
was
that was
me,
you.
this
And
overachiever.
and let me say, you said that I think we figured, and I think we can kind of move now. That because I think this is significant, but that it was overload when this
Overload,
happened.
yes.
It was overload, and it was nothing you could, I can't do anything about this. It was overload. I'm dealing with the issue I'm dealing with, and you didn't want to deal, understandably, with what you were dealing with. Okay, but you got through that. I just want to know, and I think the public might want to know that we could go deeper and deeper, but let's we're not a psychiatrist or whatever, and this is not what you came for.
No, but it's all good. I'm an open book.
If
I'm an
people
open
want
book.
more,
Yeah.
buy the book. Am I right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
but
I really go deep into it.
contact you for a speech or coach section. You would be more equipped to go to those levels. So okay, so that happened. You got through that. Now you finishing up undergrad now, and you have a PhD. So that's why. Okay.
So I ended up going to grad school.
So let's go to master's program. Let's go.
Yeah.
You finish undergrad. You go. Where do you go, and what did you major in that experience of grad school?
Yeah, and so it was great because I was such a great student in undergrad that the dean Michael Harder, there was a group of us that at graduation he said, "Are you ready?" He was actually leaving to go to another school, and his last edict was, he said, Lyman, Leanne, a couple of other students. He said to us, he was like, "Are y'all ready to start graduate school?" What do you mean? You ready to start working? He was like, "Nope." He said, "I've already set aside money for you to start graduate school."
This
so
was
I
the
literally
dean.
graduated. This is the dean Michael Harder.
This is a white gentleman, right?
It's a white gentleman, yes, at Ohio University.
So we can say that all we can dispel that rumor that all white people are bad.
Oh, absolutely. Oh,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to put that out in the air so people can.
Dean Michael Harder was a wonderful. He's still alive. He is a wonderful. He and his wife, they were absolutely wonderful. He set monies aside for a number of us, and so I got my first master's at Ohio University. So undergrad, I majored in what's known as healthcare administration with emphasis in long-term care. So I wanted to run nursing homes.
Right.
My first master's degree was in acute care. I wanted to run hospitals.
Okay.
And went through the program. It was a great program. And then I worked in healthcare and hated it.
Oh, okay.
So I had built my life.
This is the first master's degree, right?
First master's degree.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm now working in healthcare.
Right.
And I'm not happy at all.
What was the problem there? What was the dislike?
The biggest problem.
Disconnect.
The disconnect.
Yeah.
The government.
Okay.
When you are in a healthcare, it's so heavily regulated.
Right.
And what I could not reconcile, they had this thing was called a spend down in long-term care.
Right.
That I saw people with, let's say, $150,000 in assets, and in 6 months they're broke.
So you said it was a system / racket that's what it felt like. That was set up to take people's money.
Oh, especially long-term care.
And take advantage of them potentially.
It felt like it to me.
Right.
Because you think about it, in order for you to get any type of Medicaid, you're limited to the amount of assets that you can have, personal assets.
Okay.
So how do you take someone who's worked their whole life, saved $150,000, and in order for them to get any type of Medicaid, Medicare for hospital, Medicaid, state for the nursing home, and they have to spin down, and you turn this person full of dignity, and all of a sudden you turn them into basically they're a pauper. And you see this pride. That's how so many men that would have a smile and pride and feel like they're useless and would be dead within 6 or 7 months because of a broken heart.
So do you think, okay, so you had some assets, and then they take your money, and then now they're putting you on government assistance at the end, and then you're aware of, as the person that, look, everything's gone, and then
everything's gone.
And then some family members can get shady and like, there's nothing left for us. So then, and then you kind of almost all alone, and then now you're like, mentally you're gone, and then you die.
Yeah. And so I did not like that that form. Then I couldn't make really real change because, and so I remember a course that I took that was called Industrial Relations, which is the precursor to human human resources. Okay. And Dr. Yost was the professor. And I remember saying to my friend, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I want to do, HR. Because HR actually changes lives. Right. So I ended up getting the second master's. I left the healthcare field. And went into human resources. Got my
how long were you
I was in healthcare for about 3 years.
Okay. And then now you're going back. Okay, you're going back.
And now I'm going back. And
same school? School?
No. Okay. This one was American International University, AIU. Okay. American Intercontinental University. Sorry. Okay. And I got a master's in human resources. Okay. But I had worked in HR at this time for probably about 5 years. And then I said, you know what? I remember my dad, don't be a jackleg, right? Right. So I went and got my second master's in human resources. And then my career, took off. And then I started.
And look, and now we saw how that, right on the spot, how that saying made a difference.
Yes.
You saw how that stuck with you, and you said, no, I want to be proficient. I want to know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then that led to 17 professional certifications in different areas. Because I always remember that, don't be a jackleg. And then I wanted to be at the top of my game. Right. And I went and got a doctorate, PhD in human resources.
So were you teaching? Okay, you got the second master's, and you started working in that area a little bit?
Right, working in educational HR.
And then you knew it felt right.
It felt right. I knew I was where I needed to be.
Okay. How old were you at this time?
I was probably 30.
I have a reason for asking that question.
Yeah. I was probably 36, about 36, 37.
Did you write the book then? Did you write the book then?
What happened is actually I started to think about it, but I didn't release the book till 2011. Okay, so there were
how old were you when you thought about it, and how old were you when you actually released the book?
When I thought about it, I was probably like 35, 36 when I thought about it. But it
wait a minute now, and that's kind of right the time that you came, you got into HR, right?
Yes.
So you were feeling good, and there was some balance. You said something. You got another statement about balance. I forget about, but some. You started to feel good, I'm effective, and then now you wanted to address that element of the past. And you also had, and when did the friend that had the same abuse, when did he started like coming to you, you need to write something, we know that you're a talented person. When did he started like pushing you in that direction? How old were you then?
Oh man, I was in, like I said, I was thinking about it, but I'm like, nah, don't nobody want to read that. It happened a long time ago. So that was a conversation that took like about 15 years of just, I don't nobody care about that.
How old were you when you first thought? How old were you first thought about it? Huh?
So I was 34.
When you started thinking about it.
Thinking about it.
Okay.
Started thinking about it and pushed it out of my mind. The conversation I had with Mark Anthony Garrett was in 2009.
Right. And was he a big influencer and push you over the edge?
Yes, he was a youth. I've been like, man, I've been thinking nobody want to hear this. You know, that happened so long ago, man. I mean, he wasn't an old story. And he was like, no, Lyman, you have to tell it. So another year went by. 2010 is when.
And where were you working? Where were you working at that time, 2010?
I was working in human resources.
And you were finished with the HR degree.
I was finished with my HR degree.
And you were in the sweet spot of your career.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Sweet spot. Okay. I had started my own little business on the side.
Right.
My little consulting business on the side.
Right.
And
what type of business? What type of business?
I was doing speaking. Speaking. Because I used to do speeches because people would ask me, but I didn't turn it into a business until 2010 or so.
Okay.
And so in 2010, I think is when I finally sat down, pulled out a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
I know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the news,
mm-hmm.
and a young man that I went to church with had just been arrested for sexual molestation.
Okay.
And I knew him. I knew his family.
Right.
And I pulled out a piece of paper,
mm-hmm.
and I just began to write my feelings about that situation.
Okay.
And I couldn't stop writing.
Could that have been God?
I believe so. Because
when
I
you were ready at that point,
yes.
You were finally ready.
Yes. When I watched him, and I just began, what started out was to be just my reflection, how I felt about watching someone that I knew who was in a position of leadership in church and now being arrested, convicted for sexual molestation of a minor.
Right.
And the anger that I felt, and I just started writing.
Right.
I just started writing, and I couldn't stop. And I wrote every day for about 30, 45 days. And that literally became the first draft of the book, Shattered Mask. Okay. But it started out just being a letter. Right. So Mark was the one that kind of pushed me. But that event that I saw on the news of this young man going to prison for sexually molesting children,
right,
in his martial arts class,
right,
is what really triggered me to pull out a piece of paper,
right, and
start writing longhand.
Okay.
And it was a funny thing, even though I had like about 157 pages handwritten,
right,
I was gonna throw it away. I was gonna say, okay, I did my job.
I'm done.
I'm not gonna share this with anybody.
Right.
And what happened? My daughter,
right,
found it.
Okay.
And she read it, and she came to me and said, "Dad,
yeah,
I didn't know this.
Right.
This is that you." And then she shared it with my wife at the time.
Right.
She was like, I never knew this.
Right.
Is this a real story? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you got to get this published.
So now she interjected herself and said that something needs to happen here.
Something needs to happen. And I finally just said, you know what? If that's going to happen, then be prepared for the ridicule, be prepared for all this stuff that I thought would happen, never happened. People embraced it.
Whoa. The opposite happened.
I was thinking people was going to look at me like I had two heads.
Right.
That they was going to say I made it up. That
right.
It was the complete opposite. And so what I say that to say, a lot of times we hold ourselves back.
Right.
Because we think if I release this, number one, nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to hear it. Yeah. Nobody's going to believe me. All this negative self-talk that we do. And the complete opposite happened, brother.
You know what's come to my mind? Don't let your thoughts kill you.
Oh, that's a good one there.
And then you become equal to the Walking Dead.
Yes, literally. Yeah. And so when that happened, and my stepdaughter, I call her baby girl, Marlea, when she read it, and then she gave it to my then wife to read.
Right.
And then I called Mark and I said, Mark, I said, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So this is like a year and a half later since our initial conversation.
Now, what did your wife say?
She said, you got to do it.
Wow. So everybody was on board.
Everybody was on board.
Okay.
Because she was saying, I understand you better now.
Okay.
I understand the way you think now.
Okay.
And why you do the things that you do.
And what were you doing that made her understand and come to that conclusion?
I tell you three things, okay? And the rest of this is in the book.
This is an unbelievable interview.
Yeah.
This,
number one,
you're gonna have to use this to something. There's I think there's even a lot of more things that I'm not aware of everything. There's something huge here, but go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest thing for her was my ability to detach from people.
Right.
To where it almost became like I had a switch in my head.
Right.
That if you didn't like me, if you want to be around me, I didn't care. I just cut you off and probably forget your name. Okay.
Right.
And so that ability to detach and disassociate.
Yeah.
In the book, I call the mask of association because it works both ways.
Wow. That
I would go into a room, like we would go somewhere and I would want to know who's in the room, who's the important people in the room.
Right.
And if you had position, if you had status,
right,
if you had some quote level of power, then I wanted to associate with you.
Power
power was important to me.
Okay.
Okay. Not from the sense of ego, but from the sense of influence.
Okay.
Of getting things done. But the danger was I discounted people that I perceived as not as important. So that's the danger in it.
Right.
You know, so if you didn't have a title, I'm like, well, why would I talk to this person?
Right.
I'm going to the top.
Right.
Like the person calling customer service and say, I don't want to talk, I'm gonna talk to your boss.
Right.
But the boss don't know nothing, right?
Right.
So that was in my mind. So that was number one. The second was I was very sheltered. I mask of silence.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
I think most men do that. I don't want to talk about it. We're done.
Right.
Conversation over. And I would just shut the conversation down.
Right.
Because I did not want to expose my feelings. So she just called me Spot. She's like, I don't understand you. When you on a stage, you put on this air, and that's the third one, performance.
Right.
So I wouldn't talk about stuff that really mattered.
Right.
But I would get on stage and perform. Because remember, I love that.
Right.
That, oh man, that
dynamic. Yeah.
That dynamic. It's that adrenaline rush.
And you were empowered. And I was empowered,
man. I'm an HR guy. I'm head. Listen, man.
You could be loved and adored, and people just they just said amazing. I'm sure.
Think about this. I'm the head of HR at a university, right?
Right.
I'm it. I'm on the president's council.
Right.
What I say go.
Exactly.
I'm the man.
You are the man.
I'm the man when it comes to HR. I decide who gets hired, who gets let go.
Right.
Okay. I didn't abuse it.
Right.
But I worked hard to get in that position.
Right.
That I can influence things.
Right.
Move things around for the betterment.
Right.
Negotiate contracts.
Right.
And all this stuff that I worked so hard to do.
Right.
But when she brought that to my attention.
Right.
That's how I came up with the 7 Max. Because I sat down and said.
Right.
When I started, because at first it was just a bunch of notes. Right. About 100-some pages of handwritten, pretty much notes. Right. Didn't have any real order. And then I said, if I'm gonna write a book, I'm gonna tell the truth.
Right.
And I said, what is the biggest thing that I'm dealing with? These masks.
Right.
I'm not being myself. And I said, what would happen if I took these masks off?
Right.
And so while I'm writing the book, I'm also destroying these masks. So the first mask I took off was the mask of silence, man. Okay. I said, I'm not going to be silent. So I went to my pastor. I told my pastor.
Well, let me ask you this. I have to say this. Did you notice in your relationship with your wife and even your children that if something was distasteful, that or the argument ensued some kind of way, a disagreement, that you would some kind of way shut it off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was
And that was something that your wife noticed.
Yeah, I was expert because I would always use the scripture. Agree with thine adversary.
Wow.
Okay, baby. That's what you want to do. Okay, I agree with you.
Okay, wow.
So now I'm twisting.
So you didn't want any type of you wanted no confrontation.
No confrontation.
So
I would avoid it at all costs.
So you wanted absolute power, no confrontation. You run the show, and you're gonna do good by it. But you didn't no debates going on here.
We could have a conversation,
right?
But you only got 2 points. You make a point, I make a point, you make a counterpoint.
Right.
Now it's over. We agree, we disagree, we move on.
Right.
I still struggle with that. I'm being honest with you. I still struggle with that. Right. And the reason that I still struggle with that is once you've made your point and you've made a counterpoint,
right?
To me, it's like you need to have time to process it, right?
Okay.
And what tends to happen, at least for me, is I start feeling like I'm being pressured and I'm being challenged again. Right. I go back to that little kid that's in the corner and a fist getting ready to punch him in the face.
Right.
And so I go into this protective shell.
Right.
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 And that protective shell saying I need to shut everything down.
Right.
In order for me to regroup.
Okay.
Because if I don't shut it down, I'm coming out fighting.
Right.
Okay. So part of my makeup is to listen. And so one of the ways that I get over that now is I allow the conversation, and somebody needs to hear this. I allow the conversation to progress. And if I feel myself wanting to shut it down, and sometimes I even say, I apologize. You know what? I apologize. You're right. I'm going to listen. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels like I'm being challenged. And part of it is, you know what? They're not challenging me. They just get their point across, you know. But I tell people this.
And that resulted from the book and the therapy of the book.
Yes.
That you were able to recognize, and your wife mentioned it, different things started to click.
Different things started to click. And the other thing that really happened that changed Lyman is I spent about 36 years not knowing who Lyman is, right?
Okay.
So I had to give myself grace and say, Lyman, give yourself at least 30-something years to find out who the new Lyman is, right? The real, authentic. Because we want stuff real quick, right? We want it quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Right.
And it was a process to get to where you were at 35, 36. Now at 54. Okay. You see things totally different. The other thing is, and this is where I think most people will see a transformation in life. You have to be honest with yourself. If you're hurting, you need to get help. Stop trying to, I can handle it myself. No, you can't. It's killing you. The weight is too much for you to bear.
Right.
And especially for men of color. You know, we had this thing like, I ain't telling nobody my business. I don't want nobody in my business. Man, you got a big tree in your neck. You need to go to the doctor and get that tree out your neck.
You got something right there. Get the tree off your neck. That's something else.
Get the tree off your neck, man. Come on. You know, Jesus put it this way.
That's the title of a book right there. Get that tree off your neck.
Yeah, think about it. You know, Jesus put it this way. Jesus said, listen, you worrying about the little speck in somebody else, and you walking around with a big beam in your own eye.
That's true.
You know, when you get on the airplane, what they say, should we lose cabin pressure? The oxygen mask will come down, put yours on first before trying to help somebody else. So a lot of times, you know, and I was guilty of that. I'm trying, you know, in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing this for the family. I'm
Right.
doing this for everybody else,
Right.
but I'm not taking care of me.
Wow.
And so now I'm on this quest, Doc, of health, not
Right.
just wealth. You know, God blessed me to have a good measure of wealth.
Right.
Okay. But what good is that if you don't have good health?
Right. True.
So now what I'm doing is saying, I'm taking those same strategies
Right.
and applying it to my physical as well as mental and spiritual health, and teaching people how to be holistic
Right.
and not just splintered in what they do in their daily rituals or daily life activities, but
Okay.
to truly have an holistic approach.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this: what age and where were you? Were you finished with when you completed this book? Was that prior to entering the PhD program?
Yes, yeah. The book was published, I believe. I wrote the book in 2010, actually going through the publishing process, 2010. It was released in 2011.
Okay.
And
how old were you at this time?
So let's see, I'm 54. So that was
54.
2011. So what's that? 43, somewhere in there, 43.
Man, what can we tell the audience that life is an ongoing process? It's not an overnight you figure it out.
It really is. It really is. And remember, I started having this conversation at 34, 35.
Okay.
Thinking about it.
You were 41. How old you said you were?
I was about 42, 43, I think, when I actually released the book.
Okay.
But so think about it. So there's like a 7-8 year conversation.
Right.
That I'm having.
Right.
Okay. And so I tell people that you will have these conversations with yourself.
Right.
But I couldn't let it go.
Right.
It was like a nagging headache that would not go away.
Now, did you independently publish it, or you got it published?
No, I got it. I independently published it myself.
Okay.
And the reason being is it goes back to that control, because a friend of mine had went through a traditional publisher.
Right.
And he regrets. He's like, he don't even promote the book. He's like, man, once he got it, and it's again, nothing wrong with traditional publishers. I got a couple of publishers that's interested in some of my works that I've done since then. But for him, he felt like he lost control. Right. Because remember, publishers are looking at, they've paid out in advance. Right. They're looking at how they're going to recoup their costs. Right. So he had one title, they changed the title. He had a storyline. They didn't like the storyline. They changed the storyline. Wow. So when the book finally got out, in his mind, it didn't read anything like the original works. Right. And I see now what you're saying, that now that you've gotten success, then you can negotiate what deals you want to deal with them if you want to do it. Right. Because I have strong book sales. Right. And it's just opened up so many, doors, here with you today, Eric. Right. And, we have a movie coming out September called Unmasking Hope, in which the book is actually that's book one. In that book one, yeah. So it's going back. That book, I wrote that book it released in 2011. Right. I still get calls about that first book. It is my first baby. That's why we did the re-release of it. Right. Instead of 7 Masks We Were, to now turning tragedies into strategies, because as we talked earlier, right, what did I learn from all of this tragedy? And what can others learn from their tragedies? Right. Well, let's go here, because we don't want to miss this, and we're gonna get there. We're almost there. But we're trying to get all these gems out. Sure. Correlating with being a writer, and also the experience of what brought about being a writer because of what happened. Okay. So you released it 2011. What did you released it on Amazon? How did you do your marketing? And what was the response, and how did it, tell me about the book and how did it go? So we released the book on Amazon. Right. And I sent it to at a small email list, mostly friends and family, minus my mom and dad. They weren't on the list. But my
Right.
sister, remember, she snitched on me and gave
Right.
a copy to them.
Right.
And people started emailing me. They started calling me. They started sharing the book with their family and friends. And it took off like wildfire.
Wow. Wow.
Matter of fact, there was a podcast over in Great Britain.
Wow.
Patricia.
Right.
She had me on her show
Okay.
for 4 weeks in a row.
Wow. It was that impactful.
It was that impactful.
Across the ocean.
Across the ocean.
Okay.
And she said they never had a show where their switchboard lit up like a Christmas tree.
Wow. And this is people that are not black.
No.
So
Patricia Benjamin.
It crossed countries and borders, and it crossed racial groups.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And so for 4 weeks, and then from there, speaking engagements about it, that led to coaching opportunities to help people shatter their masks. Churches started calling, saying, hey, help us understand, this issue. Because at that time, keep in mind, there's still this big issue about sexual abuse in the church and not talking about it. Okay.
Right.
Not just in the Catholic Church, which has been all over the media, but even in our so-called Black churches.
Right.
That we don't agree with. So I get called how to deal with those situations. So
wow,
it just opened up so many doors and opportunities to not only share,
right,
but also to provide real strategies,
right,
to help those that are going through it, have gone through it,
mm-hmm.
or those that know someone who's going through it and how to help them.
And those 4 weeks, we get of 4 programs, and I'm assuming, I have to be careful how I say this. I'm assuming that they're in the UK, they're very strong readers.
Yes,
and they have an affinity for African Americans, unlike in the United States.
Mm. Yeah, because
a respect and affinity that we may not get here quite.
Yeah, matter of fact,
and you would respect it for your brain,
yes.
and that 4 weeks would just totally just hit, because England is a certain size that it just shot through there with that heavy reader community, and it just sales just happened almost.
Yeah, it did. I mean, to the point where I remember I got a person wanted to get permission to use it as a textbook.
Okay.
In one of their classes, which was a great honor.
Yeah.
And purchase a couple of hundred for the entire year to share, I believe, with their class there. Couple of classes. And so, and I've been on that show.
About the movie. Tell me about the movie.
Yeah. So about maybe 2 years ago,
okay,
I was getting these emails that Eric Christensen, who's the director, wanted to speak to me about the book. I thought it was a scam. I get calls all the time, Yeah, we want to turn your book into a movie, pay us $50,000 and we'll go have a conversation.
Right.
And I just spent for almost a year plus. I just trash.
Right.
So finally, his assistant reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, this is not a scam. We've been trying to get in contact with you.
So this has been a year and a half.
Yeah.
Of him chasing you down and saying, I don't know about this.
I don't know about this. So I finally said yes. Okay. I at least have a conversation.
Right.
And he showed me some of the works that he had done. Right. And we had a great conversation. Then we had, I think, 2 or 3 conversations after that. I agreed to do the deal. We signed the paperwork. They flew me out. They flew my partner and I out to Los Angeles last year to actually shoot the movie. It's a biopic. So Unmasking Hope, we go to unmaskinghopethemovie.com.
Okay.
It's about these stories of people that have overcome all sorts of tragedies, right?
Okay.
There's stories about people that overcame the Holocaust, 9/11, mass shootings, right?
Right.
And when he read my book, he was so moved that he really couldn't finish the movie. That he wanted, I mean,
you know what?
Yes.
I think I want to stop the interview here. If you let me know, we can continue onward, or we can finish it here. And I kind of feel like a part 2.
Let's do a part 2.
So everybody, you lead off. Tell them that it got. We're just at book 1, people. How many books you have?
I've read 7.
7 books. This is prior. Well, I mean, the book was finished and was out prior to going to the PhD program, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And now, when the movie is just recently taken has come,
it will be released. Came into the picture. Yes, right. Okay. So the actual.
Let's stop there. That's enough for anybody to digest. And let me know. Yeah, and we'll discuss. We're going to end it here, people. But man, you and I will talk when it's the appropriate time for the second interview. But I think this is just phenomenal, and it's so positive in the sense of showing whoever you are, Black, white, or whatever you may be, and an independent book at that, that if it's something that resonates with people, an issue in society, and I guess if it's written well and you read it by yourself, know it, you know, you may have an editor, but I'm just saying you're in control of that. But I'm saying you outside of a publishing company, how you were able to be successful and how it led up to coaching and speaking and the therapeutic aspect of it. It's just you basically are a role model to whoever. You know what I'm saying? That you were able to do this and finding out that the response was opposite of what you initially thought it was going to be, that Blacks, whites, churches, countries, that everybody just was into it. You had a guy chasing you for a film company, chasing you for a year and a half. I mean, we just put him on the cliffhanger right now.
Yeah. All
So
I can say, Eric, is this. For those that are watching, those that are listening, it sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. Get out your own way.
Okay. And we hadn't even touched the other books. We hadn't touched what triggered you, because some people would stop at the master's degree. Now I'm a book author, you know, and I'm gonna write my other books. I'm not more schooling. What? I'm a book author. When I die, they're gonna put on my tombstone, not yours. I'm a book author. You know what I'm saying? But no, you were humble and continued to climb and seeking opportunities every which way but loose to help everybody and also the vulnerable, mentally vulnerable.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I learned this from my brother.
Right.
From my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Singers can't help but sing. Dancers can't help but dance.
Right.
Writers, we can't help but write. And so part of everything, it came down to what the Bible says. There's 2 verses that I live by. Habakkuk 2:4 says, write the vision and make it plain. And then the Bible says to speak to your mountain. All right. And I think a book does that. I think a book allows you to speak to those mountains in your life and provides you with the climbing gear or the blasting gear, either. But sometimes God gives you grace to climb up, and other times he says, no, we're going to blast through this, and creates a tunnel. You see, the tunnel through it. And so both of them requires a lot of energy and a lot of grit. you know, and so I thank you. Man, this has been good. Probably one of the best interviews I've ever had. Great questions.
I just kind of sense that it's going to help so many people. I think it's going to be a big success on LinkedIn. Kind of one of my communities. I just and it's been a success, and we could see the progression and the back and forth, and ultimately it became positive. I guess, I don't know, back in my head at the beginning, I didn't want everybody to get so trapped into the abuse that they saw nothing else. And I don't know, by accident, it just kind of, I kept, well, let's go here, we'll get back. And then we got into it or whatever. And we were able to not minimize the abuse, because it is huge. It is a huge part, but how you were able to be a survivor and how you are able to inspire a nation, a world, other countries to work your way through piecemeal and make your impact that you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons that the book has been so well received is that it gives hope, and it doesn't just deal with, and we get into this in part 2, it doesn't just deal with the abuse, okay? But it deals with, what do you do afterwards?
Wow.
It deals with, how do you recognize it?
Right.
You mentioned red flags.
Right.
When we talk in part 2, I want to talk about what are some of the red flags.
You definitely want to talk about
my mother didn't see.
Right.
That my stepdad saw, but only later.
Right.
Because there were, looking back, there were some definite red flags.
Definitely. It just, by just us communicating with each other, we were able to really get these so many gems out today. And it's just like, you don't want to lose, you know, that smack in the face, or that you know, drop of information, and you don't want to, you know what I'm saying, and we just want to do justice to it, and really you know, just come back and because this was just phenomenal today. You just don't want to overload, and it's beautiful. It really is.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so at this time, people, we're going to end the interview. You go back and you watch this interview over again, and stay tuned for part 2. This is an amazing, you know, story and triumphing and being successful, and really making an impact in so many ways. And I mean, we have to say that you were truly about helping people over making money.
Yes.
And even though you had a career, because some people would have, oh, I'm just going to stay in it, so that's just the system, you know, if they take your money. No, that really affected you, and you went back to school, willing to do that, and then you finally got in your career, and then, you know, you feel it, just so many positives of where you were making decisions that were the right decisions, not the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons.
Thank you.
And not taking the easy way out. And then we go back to that stepfather about what's the saying?
Don't be a jackleg.
Yeah. So on that note, we're going to end it, people, and watch this video, and we will get to part 2. I just want to say goodbye to everybody, and let him say goodbye to everybody at this moment.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been great. Looking forward to part 2. Stay tuned. We just get started.
Right. I really appreciate it. And we're going to end it for them, but I'll just talk to you briefly afterwards.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, people. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.